The fluorescent lights in the conference room cast everything in that sickly corporate glow that made even the Christmas decorations look cheap. I stood near the back wall, nursing my third cup of coffee and watching my co-workers pretend to enjoy themselves at our annual holiday party. The spread was typical: grocery store sheet cake, lukewarm pizza, and enough cheap wine to make everyone forget they hated their jobs for exactly 2 hours. I'm Trent Ardell, 37 years old, Senior Project Manager for Wilder Industries. Not the most glamorous title, but it pays the bills and keeps me in decent suits. I've been with the company for 8 years, long enough to see 3 different reorganizations and enough office drama to fill a soap opera. What I didn't expect was to become the star of tonight's episode. My wife Zara stood near the front of the room, laughing at something our boss Darren Wilder had whispered in her ear. She worked in HR, which meant she knew everyone's secrets and wasn't shy about using that knowledge when it suited her. Tonight she wore a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, her dark hair pulled back in that severe style she favored for important occasions. Darren looked every inch the successful CEO, silver at his temples, expensive suit, confident smile that never quite reached his eyes. At 45, he'd built Wilder Industries from a small consulting firm into a mid-sized player in the tech sector. His wife Helena stood beside him, elegant in the way that money and good breeding could buy. She rarely spoke at these functions, content to smile and nod while Darren held court. "Attention, everyone!" Zara's voice cut through the conversation. She tapped her wine glass with a fork, the sound sharp and commanding. "I have an announcement to make." The room gradually quieted. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way she was looking at me, that satisfied smile I'd learned to distrust over our 5 years of marriage. "Trent and I have some wonderful news to share," she continued, her voice carrying that false warmth she used when she wanted something. "We're going to have a baby." The room erupted in congratulations, hands slapped my back, voices offered well wishes, and someone started pouring champagne. I stood frozen, watching Zara bask in the attention while my world tilted sideways. "Congratulations, man." That was Mike from accounting, pumping my hand with enthusiasm. "That's fantastic news." "About time," added Jennifer from marketing with a knowing wink. "You two have been married long enough." I nodded and smiled, playing the part while my mind raced. The medical records were clear, had been clear for 3 years now. The infection I'd contracted during a business trip to Southeast Asia had left me sterile. Zara knew this. She'd been with me at every doctor's appointment, had held my hand when we received the final confirmation. "Speech," someone called out. "Come on, Trent, say something." The crowd turned expectant faces toward me. Zara's smile widened, confident in her performance. Darren stood beside her, his expression unreadable, but his posture stiff. Helena watched from the corner, her sharp eyes moving between her husband and my wife with an intensity that made me wonder what she'd already figured out. I walked to the front of the room, each step deliberate. The conversations died away until only the hum of the air conditioning remained. 23 people stared at me, waiting for the proud father-to-be to express his joy. "Thank you all for the congratulations," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. "But there's something you should know." Zara's smile faltered slightly. Darren shifted his weight, and I caught the quick glance that passed between them. Such a small thing, but it confirmed what I'd already suspected. "I can't have children," I continued, watching the confusion spread across faces around the room. "Medical condition, confirmed by multiple doctors, so perhaps you should direct your congratulations to someone else." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Zara recovered first, her training in damage control kicking in. "Trent, honey, you're obviously confused," she said with a nervous laugh. "The doctors said there was still a chance?" "No," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "They didn't." I'd prepared for this moment without knowing it would come. 3 months ago, I'd started noticing things: late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls, the way Zara and Darren interacted at company functions. I'd begun documenting, gathering evidence like the methodical project manager I was trained to be. The insurance authorization was the smoking gun. Zara had listed Darren Wilder as her emergency contact for prenatal appointments, not her husband. She'd submitted it to our company's health plan, probably thinking no one would notice the discrepancy. I connected my phone to the room's presentation system, a skill that came in handy during client meetings. The insurance form appeared on the wall screen, blown up large enough for everyone to read. Emergency contact for prenatal care, I read aloud. Darren Wilder, CEO, Wilder Industries. The room exploded. Voices rose in shock, confusion, and what sounded like barely contained excitement. Office gossip was the unofficial currency of corporate life, and this was a jackpot nobody had expected. Zara's face flushed red. That's a mistake. I must have filled out the wrong. The dates match your appointment schedule, I said, switching to the next screen, which I cross-referenced with Darren's business travel calendar. Darren finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. Trent, you're obviously having some kind of breakdown. Am I? I looked directly at him, noting how his confident facade was cracking, because the appointments were scheduled for the same days you claimed to be in Chicago on business. Funny thing about expense reports, they leave a trail. Helena Wilder stepped forward, her movement cutting through the chaos like a blade. She'd been silent throughout the confrontation, but her expression had shifted from polite interest to something much sharper. Darren, she said, her voice carrying the authority of old money and older anger. Would you care to explain why your name is on another woman's medical forms? The question hung in the air like smoke. Darren's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Zara looked between them, her carefully constructed narrative falling apart in real time. This is all a misunderstanding. Zara tried again, but her voice lacked conviction. Trent has been under a lot of stress lately. The only stress I'm under, I said, is deciding whether to submit this to HR tonight or wait until Monday morning. That got everyone's attention. HR violations were serious business, especially when they involved the CEO and potential conflicts of interest. Darren's face went pale as the implications hit him. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low and threatening. A very serious mistake. No, I replied, meeting his stare. I'm correcting one. I disconnected my phone and walked toward the exit, leaving behind the eruption of voices and accusations. The last thing I heard before the door closed was Helena's voice, cold and precise. Darren, we need to talk. Now. The hallway felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the conference room. I leaned against the wall and finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. 5 years of marriage, 8 years with the company, all of it blown apart in the span of 10 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Well played, we should meet. H. Helena Wilder. I stared at the message, wondering what the CEO's wife could possibly want to discuss with me. Then again, after tonight, we had more in common than either of us had planned. I typed back, tomorrow, coffee shop on 5th Street, 10 a.m. Her response came immediately. See you there. As I walked to the parking garage, I could hear the muffled sounds of argument from the conference room. Zara's voice, shrill with panic. Darren's, trying to regain control. And underneath it all, the excited chatter of 20 people who'd just witnessed the kind of drama that would fuel office conversations for months. I'd spent years being the reliable one, the steady project manager who kept things running smoothly. Tonight, I'd become something else entirely. The question was, what came next? I didn't sleep. How could I? Instead, I sat in my home office, staring at the computer screen and methodically organizing every piece of evidence I'd collected over the past 3 months. Bank statements showing Darren's credit card charges at restaurants where Zara claimed to be working late. Hotel receipts from business trips that coincided with Zara's mysterious absences. Phone records that painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on far longer than the pregnancy timeline suggested. The house felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Zara hadn't come home, which wasn't surprising. She'd probably gone to Darren's place to strategize their next move, or maybe to Helena's if she was feeling particularly bold. Either way, I was grateful for the solitude. It gave me time to think, to plan, to decide exactly how I wanted to handle the wreckage of my marriage and career. At 7:30, my phone started ringing. First call was from Mike in accounting, probably fishing for details about last night's drama. I let it go to voicemail. The second call was from my sister in Portland, who must have heard something through the family network. That one went to voicemail too. The third call was from Zara. I answered on the fourth ring. "What do you want?" "Trent, we need to talk." Her voice was strained, missing its usual commanding tone. "What you did last night was completely inappropriate. You humiliated me in front of the entire company." "I humiliated you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Zara, you announced another man's pregnancy at a company party. I just made sure the congratulations went to the right person." "It's not that simple, and you know it. There are legal implications here, professional consequences." "For you and Darren, yes. I imagine there are." Silence stretched between us. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to that manipulative tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Look, I know you're hurt. I understand that. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure out how to move forward together." "Together?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where we'd planned to raise the family we'd never have. "Zara, you're pregnant with another man's child. You've been having an affair with my boss. You committed fraud on insurance documents. Exactly which part of this suggests we should work things out?" "The baby isn't—" She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. "Isn't what? Isn't Darren's? Because the medical timeline suggests otherwise? Or were you going to say the baby isn't the problem? Because from where I'm sitting, the baby is just the evidence of a much bigger problem." Another pause. When she spoke again, the mask had slipped completely. "You have no idea what you've started, Trent. Darren isn't going to let this slide. He has resources, connections. If you think you can destroy his reputation and walk away clean, you're more naive than I thought." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check. Drop this crusade of yours before it gets out of hand." "Too late for that," I said, and hung up. The coffee shop on 5th Street was one of those independent places that survived by serving actual good coffee instead of corporate mediocrity. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table near the back where we could talk without being overheard. Helena Wilder walked in precisely at 10, dressed in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but looked effortlessly casual. She ordered a black coffee and joined me at the table. Up close, I could see the strain around her eyes, the careful control that suggested she'd spent the night having the same kind of difficult conversations I'd been avoiding. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, settling into her chair with the kind of grace that spoke of expensive finishing schools and old family money. "I have to admit, I'm curious about what the CEO's wife wants to discuss with the guy who just blew up her husband's career." Helena smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "Darren's career is the least of his problems right now. I'm more interested in discussing our mutual interests." "Which are?" "Making sure that both of our cheating spouses face appropriate consequences for their actions." I studied her face, looking for signs of the grieving wife or the loyal spouse standing by her man. What I saw instead was cold, calculating intelligence and what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "You don't seem particularly surprised by last night's revelations," I observed. "I've suspected for months. Darren has never been particularly subtle about his affairs, but this one was different, more serious. When your wife announced her pregnancy, certain things became clear." Helena reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet. She opened it to a folder containing dozens of files, photos, documents, what looked like financial records. "I've been conducting my own investigation," she said, sliding the tablet across the table. I think you'll find it interesting. The photos were time-stamped and location-tagged. Darren and Zara entering a hotel together, leaving a restaurant after what was clearly an intimate dinner. Standing close together in the parking garage of our office building, their body language unmistakably romantic. But it was the financial records that made me whistle low under my breath. Company credit card charges for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases. All of it documented, all of it inappropriate, and all of it potentially actionable. "How long have you been gathering this?" I asked. 3 months. About the same time you started your own investigation, I'd guess. "Why haven't you done anything with it?" Helena's smile turned predatory. "Because I wanted to be thorough, and because I wanted to see how far they'd push things. Last night's performance exceeded even my expectations." I scrolled through more of the files, noting the meticulous organization and legal quality documentation. This wasn't the work of a heartbroken spouse looking for divorce ammunition. This was a strategic operation. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "Partnership. You have insider knowledge of their relationship and access to company systems. I have resources, connections, and a very expensive legal team. Together, we can ensure that both of them face consequences that actually matter." Consequences like what? For Darren? Professional disgrace, potential criminal charges for misuse of company funds, and a divorce settlement that leaves him with significantly less than he currently enjoys. For your wife? Loss of professional credentials, potential fraud charges related to the insurance documentation, and social consequences that will follow her for years. It was tempting. More than tempting. But I'd learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "What's in it for you?" I asked. "I mean beyond the obvious satisfaction of revenge." Helena leaned forward, her expression serious. "Trent, my husband has been cheating on me for 15 years. This isn't his first affair, it's just the first one where he was stupid enough to get someone pregnant. I've tolerated it because the alternative seemed worse, but this time, he crossed a line." "Which line?" "He put my family's reputation at risk. He used company resources to fund his affair, and he got sloppy enough to humiliate me in public." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the anger underneath. "I don't forgive public humiliation." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing the implications of what she was suggesting. This wasn't just about ending marriages or getting revenge. This was about systematically destroying two people's lives in a way that would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider crossing Helena Wilder. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "Of course, but don't take too long. Darren and your wife are probably planning their own counterattack as we speak. It would be better to strike first." She stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Check your company email when you get home. I think you'll find it illuminating." After Helena left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at the tablet she'd left behind and trying to process everything I'd learned. The evidence was damning, more comprehensive than anything I'd managed to gather on my own. With Helena's resources and connections, we could probably destroy both Darren and Zara's careers and reputations completely. The question was whether I wanted to be that person. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stay away from my wife if you know what's good for you. D." I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside me. Darren Wilder thought he could intimidate me into backing down, the same way he'd probably intimidated other people over the years. He was about to learn that he'd picked the wrong target. I typed back, "Looking forward to our next conversation." Then I headed home to check my email and plan my next move. The email Helena had mentioned was waiting in my inbox when I got home, marked with the red flag that indicated urgent company business. The sender was listed as HR compliance, but I recognized the routing signature as coming from Helena's personal account. She'd clearly maintained access to company systems despite not being an official employee. The subject line read, "Expense report discrepancies, immediate review required." Inside was a spreadsheet that made my project manager heart sing with its thoroughness and attention to detail. Helena had cross-referenced Darren's expense reports with company travel policies, credit card statements, and calendar entries going back 18 months. The pattern was clear and damning. Systematic misuse of company funds to finance his affair with Zara. But it was the attached memo that really caught my attention. It was addressed to the board of directors and outlined potential legal liability for the company if the affair became public knowledge. Helena had done her homework on employment law, conflict of interest policies, and fiduciary responsibility. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. She was positioning herself to protect the company's interests while destroying her husband's career. My phone rang while I was reviewing the documents. The caller ID showed my direct supervisor, Tom Bradley, probably calling to discuss the fallout from last night's party. "Trent, we need to talk," Tom said without preamble. "Can you come in this afternoon?" "About what happened last night?" "Among other things, HR wants to conduct interviews with everyone who was present. There are also some questions about your access to company systems and how you obtained certain documents." I felt a chill run down my spine. Darren was moving faster than I'd expected, trying to frame the situation as corporate espionage rather than adultery exposure. "Tom, you were there. You saw what happened. I presented evidence of fraud and policy violations." "I know what I saw, but there are procedures for handling these things. Bypassing the proper channels and ambushing people at a company party isn't the way we do business. And having an affair with a subordinate while using company funds to pay for it is?" Silence on the other end. Tom was a decent guy, but he was also a company man who understood which way the political winds were blowing. "Just come in at 2:00, he said finally. "Bring any documentation you have and probably a lawyer." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. After Tom hung up, I sat staring at my phone and considering my options. I could play this defensively, hire a lawyer, and hope that the evidence would speak for itself. Or I could take Helena's advice and strike first. I chose option 2. The first call I made was to the company's external auditing firm. As senior project manager, I had legitimate reasons to contact them about financial irregularities. I scheduled a meeting for the next morning and requested a full review of executive expense reports for the past year. The second call was to a reporter I'd met at a trade conference 6 months ago. Janet Morrison covered corporate malfeasance for the business section of the local paper, and she'd given me her card with the standard line about calling if I ever had a story worth telling. "Janet, this is Trent Ardell from Wilder Industries. I think I have something you'd be interested in." "Corporate fraud? Executive misconduct? Please tell me it's something juicy." "CEO using company funds to finance an extramarital affair that resulted in a pregnancy, complete with documentation and witnesses." The pause that followed told me I had her full attention. "Can you prove it?" "Expense reports, credit card statements, insurance fraud, and about 20 witnesses to last night's confession. Plus, the CEO's wife is cooperating." "Holy crap. When can we meet?" We arranged to meet that evening at a restaurant across town. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my evidence and preparing for what was likely to be a very unpleasant conversation with HR. The meeting at Wilder Industries went exactly as I'd expected. Tom was there, along with Patricia Wells from HR and a lawyer I didn't recognize, but who was clearly expensive. They'd set up in the small conference room, the same one where we usually conducted termination interviews. "Trent, thank you for coming in," Patricia began with the kind of false warmth that HR professionals used when they were about to ruin your life. "We need to discuss the events of last night and some concerns that have been raised about your conduct." "What concerns specifically?" The lawyer leaned forward. "Mr. Ardell, there are questions about how you obtained confidential company information and whether your actions constitute harassment of other employees." Harassment? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. I exposed fraud and policy violations. That's not harassment, that's whistleblowing. The manner in which you chose to reveal this information was inappropriate and potentially damaging to the company's reputation, Patricia said. There are proper channels for reporting concerns about executive conduct. You mean the HR department that my wife works for? The same HR department that apparently missed the fact that she was having an affair with the CEO and committing insurance fraud? Patricia's face flushed. She'd obviously been hoping to control the narrative and paint me as a disgruntled employee acting out of spite. Mr. Ardell, the lawyer interjected, we're prepared to offer you a generous severance package in exchange for your resignation and a signed agreement not to discuss company business with outside parties. There it was. Hush money wrapped in corporate speak. They wanted me gone before I could do any more damage to Darren's reputation or the company's stock price. What kind of severance are we talking about? I asked, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. 6 months' salary plus benefits continuation and a neutral reference for future employment, Patricia said. It's a very generous offer considering the circumstances. Considering what circumstances? The fact that I exposed criminal behavior by the CEO? The fact that you violated company policy and potentially broke several laws in obtaining and disseminating confidential information, the lawyer replied smoothly. I stood up, having heard enough. I'll need time to consider your offer. In the meantime, I assume I'm suspended pending the outcome of your investigation. With pay, Tom said quickly. This is just a precaution while we sort everything out. Of course it is. I left the building feeling oddly liberated. They'd shown their hand, and it was exactly what Helena had predicted. Darren was using his position and resources to try to control the situation, but he was also acting from a position of weakness. If he'd been confident in his legal position, he wouldn't be offering hush money. The meeting with Janet Morrison was more productive. She was a sharp reporter in her 40s who'd built her career exposing corporate corruption, and she immediately grasped the significance of what I was offering her. This is bigger than just an affair, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. Using company funds for personal expenses is embezzlement. The insurance fraud adds another layer. And if there's a pattern of this behavior, it could implicate the board for failing in their oversight responsibilities. How long would you need to verify everything and write the story? With this amount of documentation? 2 days, maybe 3? I'll need to reach out to the company for comment, which gives them a chance to respond or try to shut the story down. They offered me a severance package today in exchange for keeping quiet. Janet grinned. Even better. That suggests they know they're in trouble. Mind if I quote you on that? We spent another hour going through the details and timeline. Janet was thorough, asking the kind of questions that would come up if Darren tried to challenge the story legally. By the time we finished, I was confident that she had everything she needed to write a story that would end Darren's career and probably result in criminal charges. On the drive home, I called Helena to update her on the day's events. They moved faster than I expected, she said when I finished describing the HR meeting. Darren must be more worried than he's letting on. What about you? Any fallout on your end? Darren tried to convince me that your accusations were baseless and motivated by jealousy. When that didn't work, he suggested we should present a united front to protect the company's interests. And your response? I told him that I'd already contacted my divorce attorney and that he should probably do the same. There was satisfaction in her voice, but also something harder. Helena Wilder was a woman who'd been underestimated for too long, and she was clearly enjoying the opportunity to show exactly how dangerous that had been. The reporter will contact the company tomorrow for comment, I told her. Once that happens, there's no going back. Good. I'm tired of playing defense. After we hung up, I sat in my driveway for a few minutes, looking at the house I'd shared with Zara for 3 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. The story would break. The investigation would begin, and whatever was left of my old life would be officially over. But as I walked to the front door, I realized I wasn't sad about that. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story. The story broke at 6 a.m. on Thursday morning, leading the business section with a headline that was everything Janet Morrison had promised. CEO of Wilder Industries under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. The online version included copies of the expense reports and a photo of Darren and Zara entering a hotel together, their faces clearly visible despite the low lighting. My phone started ringing before I'd finished reading the article. The first call was from Tom Bradley, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Trent, what have you done? The phones are ringing off the hook here. We've got reporters, investors, and board members all demanding answers." "I've done what the company should have done months ago," I replied. "I've exposed fraud and corruption at the executive level. You've destroyed the company's reputation. Our stock price is already down 12% in pre-market trading. The stock price is down because your CEO was stealing company funds to pay for his affair. Don't blame me for reporting the crime." Tom hung up without another word. The second call was from Zara, and this time she wasn't trying to sound reasonable. "You vindictive piece of garbage!" she screamed into the phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is ruined. My reputation is destroyed." "Your career was ruined the moment you decided to have an affair with your boss and commit insurance fraud," I said calmly. "I just made sure everyone else knew about it. This isn't over, Trent. Darren has lawyers, real lawyers. They're going to come after you for everything you have. Looking forward to it. I'll make sure to have my evidence organized for them." The third call was from Helena, and her tone was completely different from the others. "Have you seen the news coverage?" she asked. "Just finished reading Janet's article. She did a thorough job." "It's not just her. 3 other outlets have picked up the story, and the morning news shows are starting to cover it. Darren's phone has been ringing since 5 a.m. "How is he handling it?" "About as well as you'd expect. He's in full damage control mode, trying to spin this as a personal attack by a disgruntled employee. His lawyers are already drafting statements about defamation and corporate espionage." "Let them. Everything I provided to the reporter is documented and verifiable." "I know. That's why I'm calling. The board is meeting in emergency session this afternoon. They're going to ask Darren to step down pending a full investigation." I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what we'd hoped for, consequences that actually mattered. "What about Zara?" "Her employment was terminated this morning, officially for policy violations related to the insurance fraud. Unofficially, because the company can't afford to keep someone at the center of a scandal like this." After Helena hung up, I made coffee and settled in to watch the coverage spread across social media and news websites. The story had everything that made for good corporate scandal reporting: money, abuse of power, and clear documentation of wrongdoing. By noon, it was trending on Twitter with hashtags like Wilder Scandal and Doc's CEO Affair. The most damaging coverage came from a financial news channel that had obtained additional information about Darren's expense patterns. They'd found evidence of similar behavior going back 3 years, suggesting that the affair with Zara wasn't his first misuse of company funds for personal relationships. At 2 o'clock, I was in my kitchen making lunch when someone started pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Darren Wilder standing on my porch, his face red with anger and his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "What do you want, Darren?" "I want to talk to you, man to man, about this situation you've created." "I didn't create anything. I just documented what you and my wife were already doing. You know that's not true. You've taken a private matter between adults and turned it into a public circus. You've damaged the company, hurt innocent employees, and destroyed people's careers." "Innocent employees?" I laughed. "Darren, you were stealing company money. Your affair partner was committing insurance fraud. The only innocent people here are the employees who didn't know their CEO was a thief." Darren's face darkened. "Let me in. We need to discuss this properly." "No. If you want to talk, we can do it right here." "Fine." He stepped closer to the door, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call that reporter and tell her you made a mistake. You're going to admit that you doctored those documents and that you were acting out of jealousy and spite." Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to make your life very unpleasant. I have resources you can't imagine, connections in places you don't know exist. I can make sure you never work in this industry again. I can tie you up in lawsuits for years. You can what? I interrupted. Threaten me? Intimidate me? Is that how you usually handle people who expose your criminal behavior? This isn't criminal behavior. It's a personal matter that you've blown out of proportion. Embezzlement is a felony, Darren. Insurance fraud is a felony. Using your position as CEO to coerce subordinates into relationships is harassment. None of that is personal. It's all criminal. Darren stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too angry to speak. Finally, he stepped back from the door. "This isn't over," he said. "You have no idea what you've started." "Yes, I do," I replied. "I've started the process of holding you accountable for your actions, something that should have happened a long time ago." After Darren left, I called Helena to let her know about his visit. "He came to your house?" She sounded genuinely surprised. "That's incredibly stupid, even for him. I got the impression he's not thinking very clearly right now." "He's not. The board meeting was brutal. They've suspended him without pay, pending the outcome of both the internal investigation and whatever criminal charges the district attorney decides to file." "Criminal charges?" "The company turned over all financial records to the authorities this afternoon. They're treating it as potential embezzlement and fraud. Darren could be looking at serious prison time if they decide to prosecute." The satisfaction I felt was mixed with something that might have been sympathy, but I pushed that aside. Darren had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. What about the company itself? Surviving, barely. The board appointed an interim CEO and hired a crisis management firm. Stock price is still falling, but it's not in free fall anymore. And Zara? I haven't heard anything specific, but I imagine she's dealing with her own legal problems. Insurance fraud is taken very seriously, especially when it involves pregnancy and prenatal care. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sun set over the suburban neighborhood where I'd planned to spend the rest of my life. Tomorrow, I'd need to start thinking about practical things. Finding a new job, probably in a different city, definitely in a different industry. Darren's threats weren't entirely empty. He did have connections, and corporate executives had long memories for people who caused them problems. But tonight, I was content to sit and reflect on what we'd accomplished. In less than a week, we'd exposed systematic corruption, ended a fraudulent marriage, and held powerful people accountable for their actions. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd chosen. My phone buzzed with a text from Helena. "Dinner tomorrow? I think we should discuss next steps." I typed back, "Absolutely. We're not finished yet." Because the truth was, we weren't finished. This was just the beginning. The restaurant Helena chose was exactly the kind of place I'd expect from someone with her background. Expensive, discreet, and located in a part of town where business deals were made over wine that cost more than most people's car payments. She was already seated when I arrived, studying a tablet and making notes with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she was planning something significant. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering wine. After the week we've had, I thought we could both use it." The wine was excellent, though I couldn't have told you the vintage or region. My mind was focused on the documents Helena had spread across the table, legal filings, financial statements, and what looked like correspondence from multiple law firms. "Darren's lawyers contacted me today," she began without preamble. They're proposing a settlement that would avoid criminal prosecution in exchange for full restitution and his resignation from all corporate positions. Are you going to accept it? Helena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Not a chance. Darren has spent 15 years thinking he was untouchable, that his money and connections could protect him from consequences. It's time he learned otherwise. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from Darren's personal accounts to various offshore entities, along with correspondence from tax attorneys that suggested he'd been hiding income for years. Where did you get this? I've been married to him for 12 years. I know where he keeps his important documents, and I have access to accounts he doesn't think I know about. Helena's voice was matter-of-fact, but there was steel underneath. Darren always underestimated me. He thought I was just another trophy wife who cared more about shopping than business. But you're not. I have an MBA from Wharton and a law degree from Harvard. I've been managing my family's investment portfolio since I was 25. The only reason I married Darren was because I thought he had potential. She paused to sip her wine. I was wrong. The documents painted a picture of systematic tax evasion and financial fraud going back nearly a decade. Combined with the embezzlement charges from the company investigation, Darren was looking at serious federal prison time. What do you need from me? I asked. Your testimony, when the time comes, and your help with one final piece of the puzzle. Helena opened her tablet and showed me a series of emails between Darren and Zara. The messages were intimate, but they also contained detailed discussions of company business, client information, strategic plans, competitive intelligence. She was feeding him information about HR investigations and employee complaints, Helena explained, including advance warning about people who were planning to report his inappropriate behavior. That's conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Exactly. Which means your wife is looking at federal charges in addition to the insurance fraud. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, sadness, and something that might have been relief. Zara had made her choices, just like Darren had made his. The consequences were harsh, but they were also appropriate. When will all this become public? The criminal charges will be filed next week. The civil litigation will take months, possibly years. But the important thing is that it's out of our hands now. The system is working. We spent the next hour going through the timeline and discussing what would happen next. Helena's divorce would be finalized within 6 months, leaving her with the majority of Darren's assets and full control of her family's investments. Darren would likely spend the next decade in federal prison, assuming he was convicted on even half of the charges being prepared against him. What about you? Helena asked as we finished dinner. Have you thought about what comes next? New job, new city, new life. Darren was right about one thing. I'll probably have trouble finding work in this industry after all the publicity. That's not necessarily true. What you did took courage, and there are companies that value whistleblowers. I might be able to help with introductions. I'd appreciate that. Helena signaled for the check, then leaned back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just completed a successful business negotiation. You know, when I first suspected Darren was having an affair, I thought about handling it quietly. Private investigators, discreet divorce attorneys, sealed settlements, the usual way these things are managed in our social circle. What changed your mind? The pregnancy announcement. That was so arrogant, so publicly humiliating, that I realized quiet wouldn't be enough. Darren needed to face real consequences, not just financial ones. And Zara? Your wife made the mistake of thinking she could manipulate her way out of any situation. She's about to learn that some consequences can't be talked away or explained away. As we left the restaurant, Helena handed me a business card for a law firm in Chicago. They specialize in employment law and whistleblower protection. The managing partner is a friend of my family. If you decide you want to pursue legal action against Wilder Industries for retaliation, they'll take the case. Thank you. For everything. Thank you. I couldn't have done this without your evidence and your willingness to go public. Darren always said I was too soft to be truly dangerous. He was wrong about that too. The drive home gave me time to process everything that had happened over the past week. 7 days ago, I'd been a middle manager in a failing marriage, going through the motions of a life that had stopped satisfying me years earlier. Tonight, I was unemployed, divorced in all but the legal sense, and facing an uncertain future. But I was also free. Free from a marriage built on lies, free from a job that had never valued my contributions, and free from the illusion that playing by the rules would protect me from people who had no intention of following those same rules. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, most from reporters wanting follow-up interviews about the expanding scandal. I deleted them all without reading them. The story was out there now, gathering momentum and consequences of its own. My part in it was finished, except for one final detail. I pulled into my driveway and saw Zara's car parked on the street. She was sitting on the front porch, still wearing the clothes she'd had on when she left for work that morning. Her face was streaked with makeup and tears, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of everything that had collapsed around her. "We need to talk," she said, as I approached the door. "I think we've said everything that needs saying." "Please, Trent, 5 minutes. Then I'll leave and you'll never have to see me again." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and let her follow me inside. She stood in the living room, looking around at the house we'd shared like she was seeing it for the first time. "I know you hate me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've destroyed everything between us. But I need you to understand that it wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen?" "Darren promised me things. Promotion, security, a future. He said Helena didn't understand him, that their marriage was just for appearances. He made it sound like we were building something real together, while you were married to me. I know how that sounds. I know it was wrong, but I felt trapped, Trent. Trapped in a marriage that wasn't going anywhere. Trapped in a job that didn't challenge me. Trapped in a life that felt like it was happening to someone else. So you decided to blow it all up." Zara sat down on the couch, her composure finally cracking completely. "I thought I was taking control. I thought I was choosing my own path for once. Instead, I've lost everything. My job, my marriage, my reputation. The lawyers say I could go to prison. You could have just asked for a divorce. Would you have given me one?" The question hung in the air between us. The honest answer was probably no. I'd have fought to save the marriage, gone to counseling, tried to fix whatever was broken between us. I'd have done everything except the one thing that might have actually helped, listened when she tried to tell me she was unhappy. "It doesn't matter now," I said finally. "What's done is done. I know. I just wanted you to hear me say that I'm sorry. Not for leaving. We both know this marriage was over long before Darren came along. But for the way I did it, for the lies and the humiliation and the public spectacle. You didn't deserve that." It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months, maybe years. It didn't change anything, but it was something. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Face whatever consequences come. Try to rebuild something from what's left. Hope that someday this will all seem like something that happened to someone else?" Zara stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you'll be happier without me. You deserve someone who appreciates what you have to offer." After she left, I sat in the quiet house and tried to imagine what that future might look like. New city, new job, new relationships built on honesty instead of convenience. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be real in a way that my life hadn't been for a long time. My phone buzzed with one final text of the day, this one from Helena. "Federal indictments will be announced Monday morning. Thought you should know." I typed back, "Thank you. For everything." Her response came immediately. "Thank you. Justice is a team sport. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and stepping into whatever came next. For the first time in years, the future felt like something I was choosing rather than something that was happening to me. And that, I realized, was worth more than any revenge.